They called it suicide, they called it madness, but the human called it a walk. In the silent heart of the orbital academy, where alien cadets floated through polished corridors and gravity was more of a suggestion than a law, whispers spread like wildfire. The subject of their gossip was a single human student-an exchange candidate from the distant blue planet called Earth. His name was Commander Elias Ward, though the aliens simply called him the Anomaly. The Academy was the pinnacle of interstellar education, a place where the brightest young minds of 50 civilizations trained to master the mechanics of deep space survival. They learned how to calculate shield harmonics, how to cycle oxygen in hostile atmospheres, how to walk in vacuum suits built with molecular seals. To them the void was not just dangerous, it was death incarnate. So when Elias walked into the lecture hall on his first day and sat casually with his oxygen mask hanging loose around his neck, the room erupted in laughter. Does he not value his own lungs? Hissed a Xyrithian, its translucent tendrils pulsing in disbelief. He will never pass the survival trials. Another alien scoffed, its 6 eyes narrowing. His species evolved in one fragile bubble. They cannot endure the abyss. For weeks, the ridicule continued. Humans were too fragile, too reckless, too dependent on the cocoon of their atmosphere. While the other cadets drilled obsessively in simulation chambers, Elias watched from the sidelines, sketching diagrams in his notebook or, worse, napping with his boots propped against the bulkhead. The aliens mistook his calmness for ignorance. But then came the challenge. Professor Vedran, a hulking instructor whose scales gleamed like obsidian, had grown tired of Elias's behavior. One morning, in front of the entire academy, he announced a test designed to silence the human once and for all. Today, Vedran boomed, one of you will step outside this station without protection. In the vacuum, no oxygen tanks, no thermal suits. The void will strip your lungs in seconds, freeze your blood in minutes. Let us see who dares. The room went still. Every alien I turned toward Elias. They expected him to laugh nervously, to refuse, to finally break, but instead, the human rose from his seat, rolled up his sleeves, and smiled. I'll go, Elias said simply. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some cadets whispered suicide, others whispered insanity, but no one could look away as Elias followed Vedran to the airlock. He stood inside the chamber, the massive steel doors groaning shut behind him. No protective suit, no breathing gear. Only the plain fabric of his academy uniform clung to him, a flimsy barrier against the void. The countdown began. The hiss of decompression filled the chamber. On the other side of the viewing glass, dozens of alien cadets pressed close, their faces etched with morbid curiosity. The doors opened and then Elias stepped into space, not with terror, not with hesitation, but with the ease of a man strolling through a garden. The airlock yawned open, spilling Elias Ward into the infinite black. No hiss of oxygen, no shimmering suit. Just a human bare-skinned beneath his academy uniform standing where no alien dared even to breathe. The watching cadets were frozen. Many had seen bodies decompressed in vacuum before. It was part of training simulations. They expected his chest to cave, his eyes to bulge, his body to convulse in the cruel grip of the void. Yet none of that happened. Elias lifted his gaze to the stars and inhaled us. If there was air, of course, there wasn't. But his chest rose and fell in perfect rhythm, his heart steady, his skin unbroken. A ripple of horrified whispers swept through the observation deck. Impossible, muttered a 6-eyed Krathian. His blood should be boiling, his lungs should already be collapsing, said another, its mandibles twitching. But the human just walked forward, not floating, not flailing. Each step was measured, his boots finding invisible purchase as though he were on a solid floor. With each movement, faint ripples of light shimmered around his body, subtle waves, like heat haze in the desert. The aliens pressed closer to the glass. That is not biology, one cadet whispered. That is defiance, another corrected, shuddering. Professor Vedran himself frowned. His massive scaled arms crossed over his chest. He had expected Elias to crumble, to be carried away as a cautionary tale of arrogance. Instead, he was witnessing a truth that gnawed at the foundations of everything the Academy taught. Elias paused halfway across the platform, stars stretching endlessly around him. He lifted one hand, curling it into a fist, then opening it again. Each motion left trails of faint blue light, bending and weaving around his fingers like strands of silk. It wasn't just survival, it was control. Look closely, Vedran growled to his students, his deep voice edged with unease. Do you see it? The void bends. For him, gasps followed his words. For countless species, space was a hostile enemy, a place to endure only through technology. But here was a human, strolling casually as if space itself had agreed to spare him. Then Elias turned back toward the observation glass, his lips curved into the faintest smile, and he raised 2 fingers in a casual salute. That simple gesture struck harder than any lecture, any demonstration. To the alien cadets, it was an act of defiance, a statement that screamed, "You were wrong about me. You were wrong about humans." Seconds passed, then a minute, then 2. Elias kept walking as though he could wander out into the void forever. His pulse remained steady. His skin showed no signs of frost. The shimmering aura around him grew brighter, forming a faint halo that made the stars themselves seem dimmer. By the time he finally stepped back into the airlock, silence consumed the academy. The cadets no longer laughed. They no longer mocked. They watched with wide, unblinking eyes as Elias re-entered the station and stood before them live, unscathed, and calm. He dusted his sleeves as though he'd just returned from a stroll through a park, while he said, voice light and steady, "That was refreshing." No one spoke. For the first time in the Academy's long history, the aliens didn't see a fragile human. They saw something else, something dangerous, something unstoppable. The Academy had always been a place of arrogant certainty. Every alien species arrived believing their own physiology, their own history of conquest, made them superior. Humans were the latecomers, the underdogs, tolerated for their curiosity, but dismissed for their fragility. But after Ilias's walk into the void, that certainty cracked. The lecture hall was heavy with silence when the cadets gathered the next day. The massive amphitheater, usually buzzing with interspecies chatter, now echoed only with the low hum of translation nodes. Everyone was waiting for answers, for reassurance, for an explanation that could let them sleep again. Professor Vedran entered with unusual stiffness. His reptilian frame normally radiated confidence, every motion sharpened by authority. Today, though, his crest of scales lay flat against his skull, his eyes dark and uneasy. He paced to the front and activated the holoscreen. A frozen image of Elias shimmered into the air, the human, standing amid the stars, a faint aura glowing around his body. "This," Vedran began, his voice carrying a tremor he hated, "is not possible. And yet you all witnessed it." The cadets leaned forward. Some hissed, others clicked their mandibles, but none dared interrupt. "Human anatomy," he continued, "should not withstand vacuum. No species here could, and yet he did. Which means either we misunderstand human biology." His gaze swept across the room, lingering on Elias, who sat calmly among his peers, "or the human has adapted in a way we cannot yet comprehend." Whispers rippled. A tall insectoid cadet raised her spindly arm. "Professor, if humans can adapt to vacuum, what else can they adapt to?" The question hung like a blade. Elias, for his part, didn't look smug. He didn't need to. His calm presence, his steady heartbeat was more unnerving than arrogance could ever be. "Mr. Ward," Vedran finally said, turning to him, "perhaps you would enlighten us. How did you survive?" Dozens of alien eyes swiveled toward the human. Some glittered with curiosity, others burned with fear. Elias took his time standing. He looked at them, one by one, as though measuring not their bodies but their doubts. Then he spoke with disarming simplicity. "I didn't survive," he said. "I just kept living." Confusion spread. A winged cadet hissed. "That is nonsense." Elias tilted his head. "Maybe to you, but humans were stubborn. We don't accept the rules you think the universe writes in stone. When you told me I couldn't walk outside, I believed you until I tried. And then I realized the rules aren't as fixed as you want them to be." The room bristled. The idea was heresy. The laws of physics were sacred. To question them was madness. And yet, every cadet had seen him walk the void. Madness had become truth. Professor Vedran's claws flexed against the podium. For the first time in centuries, he felt a chill not from the cold of space, but from the unknown standing in human form before him. Elias sat back down, calm as ever. His words lingered like an infection in their minds, spreading, mutating, destabilizing, and with every passing second, one truth grew harder to ignore. If humans could do this, what else might they conquer? Rumors spread faster than plasma through a ruptured conduit. Within a single cycle, every corridor of the academy buzzed with whispers of the human who walked the void. Some called Elias a liar, a trickster hiding behind invisible technology. Others murmured that perhaps humanity had struck a secret bargain with the vacuum itself. But beneath all the speculation was fear. The academy's cadets had always measured one another by limits. The insectoid Kavar could survive weeks without food. The scaled Drakthi could swim in molten rivers. The winged Solari could fly in atmospheres too thin for others to breathe. Each species wore its endurance as armor. Humans had none of that, or so everyone thought. Now limits themselves were being questioned. In the mess hall, aliens gathered in hushed circles, their voices edged with unease. If humans can walk in vacuum, then the battlefield changes, one cadet hissed, antennae twitching. They could infiltrate without suits, another muttered. They could sabotage ships from the outside. Or worse, whispered a third. They could survive places we cannot. Every theory added weight to the tension, and Ilioscum, ordinary Elias, walked among them like a living contradiction. Professor Vedran, meanwhile, retreated into his private chambers. His claws tapped furiously across glowing halopanels, cross-referencing every known archive of human physiology. Again and again, the results came back the same: fragile lungs, soft skin, weak resilience. The records showed a species utterly dependent on technology for survival. And yet the image burned in his mind, Elias striding across the void, stars glimmering at his back. It made no sense, unless Vedran's gaze hardened. Perhaps humans were evolving faster than recorded. Perhaps they had unlocked a latent ability, hidden deep in their biology, waiting for the right moment to emerge. If that was true, then humanity was more dangerous than any empire realized. The professor summoned a council of senior instructors. They gathered in secret, a half-dozen towering figures representing the Academy's diverse species. Holograms flickered as the room sealed itself shut. "We must treat this seriously," Vedran declared. "Either we witnessed a deception or the beginning of something we cannot control." One instructor, a crystalline being whose body pulsed with inner light, shook their head. I watched closely. There was no device, no shield. The void bent for him. Another hissed. "Then humans are not what they claim. They are more." The word hung heavy in the chamber. More. If humanity was more, then every balance of power across the stars was in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Elias sat in his quarters, oblivious to the storm of paranoia he had unleashed. He stared at his hands, flexing his fingers slowly, as if feeling the faint ripples of light that had surrounded him in the void. He wasn't entirely sure what had happened either, but deep down, he felt it. Something within him had awakened, and it wasn't finished. The Academy no longer felt like a place of study. It felt like a cage of watching eyes. Wherever Elias went, he felt the weight of stares pressing against his back. Some were filled with awe, others with suspicion, and a few with something darker: envy. In the training arenas, cadets once eager to spar with humans now hesitated. Who would dare test themselves against the creature who had walked in the void? Even the boastful Drakti warriors, who prided themselves on their resilience, found excuses to withdraw. But the unease didn't silence curiosity, it sharpened it. Late at night, Elias began receiving visits. First came a Solari cadet, wings folded tight, voice trembling as she asked, "Teach me. Show me how you endured." He had no answer. He wasn't even sure he could repeat what he'd done. Still, the requests multiplied. The insectoid Kava wanted to know if his body could be pushed the same way. A crystalline entity begged him to reveal the trick. Even the professors asked careful, probing questions. But Elias only shook his head. "I don't know. I didn't resist space. I accepted it." Those words, though vague, spread like wildfire. The idea that humans didn't conquer their environment through strength, but through sheer refusal to yield, became a story told in whispers. Some mocked it as mysticism. Others took it as a warning. The Academy's council grew restless. Meetings turned heated, voices raised in fear and anger. "If a human cadet can do this," one professor spat, "what happens when their soldiers learn it? Entire fleets could be dismantled by hand," another replied, mandibles clicking nervously. "They'll overturn the balance of power." Professor Vedran remained silent through these debates, though his mind churned. He had taught countless species, seen endless claims of superiority, but never had he encountered a species that rewrote the rules themselves. And Elias Ward, quiet and unassuming, had done so without even trying. Still, Vedran's instincts told him something crucial. Elias was not finished changing. The boy's aura in the void had not been stable. It shimmered as though testing its own limits. Whatever force had awakened was still growing, still shaping itself. And Vedran feared what it might become. One night, Elias stood again at the viewport, staring at the endless black. This time, there was no audience, no experiment, just him and the stars. He placed his palm against the glass, and once more faint ripples of blue light spread outward, as though reality itself recognized his touch. He whispered to the void, "Why me?" The stars did not answer. But deep in his chest, Elias felt something stir, a pulse of energy. Vast and patient, like a sleeping giant waiting to rise. Behind him, The door slid open. Professor Vedran's massive frame filled the room. He said nothing at first, only studied the faint glow around the human's hand. Finally, his deep voice broke the silence. "Ward," he rumbled, "you need to understand, the others are not afraid of you surviving space. They're afraid of what you'll do next." Elias turned from the viewport, the faint glow fading from his hand. Professor Vedran's eyes burned with something Elias had never seen before. Not scorn, not ridicule, but caution. "What do you mean?" Elias asked. Vedran's claws tapped against the wall, a restless rhythm. "Every species here has boundaries we cannot cross. Fire consumes us, poison weakens us, vacuum kills us. These limits define who we are. But you, Ward." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a growl. "You broke one." Elias swallowed but stood his ground. "Maybe your limits aren't ours." The professor's crest bristled, a mix of frustration and reluctant respect. "That is precisely the problem. If humans can step beyond barriers the rest of us cannot, then what place do we have against you? What happens when your kind learns to master this?" Ilias didn't answer. He wasn't sure he wanted to. The next cycle, the academy erupted in turmoil. Word of Ilias's feat had reached beyond the campus, carried by cadets whispering to their homeworlds. Alien fleets wanted reports. Governments demanded data. Some saw opportunity if humans could survive space. Perhaps they could be allies, pioneers who opened pathways no other species dared to tread. Others saw only threat. If one human cadet could walk in the void, what could an army of them do? Elias became the center of a storm he hadn't asked for. Everywhere he walked, corridors fell silent. Some cadets bowed their heads in respect, others sneered with fear thinly disguised as hatred. He could feel the galaxy shifting under his feet, a tide he could neither stop nor control. One evening the Academy's council summoned him. The chamber was filled with shadows and voices sharpened by tension. "You are an anomaly," one instructor declared, her crystalline body pulsing like a heartbeat. "You are a danger," hissed another, wings twitching. "You are proof," said Vedran at last, silencing them. Elias stood before them, hands loose at his sides, expression calm. "Proof of what?" The professor's gaze was heavy, but there was no malice in it, only recognition. "Proof that humans are not bound by the universe the way we are. Proof that your kind might shape reality itself." The words struck like thunder. Elias felt it tooth the ripple inside him, the unspoken connection to the void, the sense that he had only touched the surface of what was possible. He didn't know what this power meant, or how far it could go. But he knew one thing, it wasn't going away. When he left the chamber, whispers followed. Some called him the Void Walker, others named him the Human Without Limits. Titles meant little to him, but he understood their weight. For the first time in galactic history, the Academy feared not the strongest warriors, nor the oldest empires, but a single human cadet who had walked outside without fear. Elias glanced once more at the stars beyond the glass. He felt their endless pull, their silent challenge, and with a quiet smile he whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning."